Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. Today, we're going to be expanding on the work-life balance theme in podiatric medicine. And my guest, Dr. Greg Sheremeta, is practicing in Troy, Michigan. And he just graduated in 2023 from the 3-year medicine and surgery residency program at St. Mary Mercy Hospital in Livonia, Michigan. Greg is a 2020 graduate of the Des Moines University College of Podiatric Medicine and Surgery. He did his undergraduate work at Eastern Michigan and has a master's in public health from Michigan State. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Sheremeta.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to doing this.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show. Dr. Sheremeta, we're informal on Dean's Chat. We'll go first names if that's okay with you, Greg and Jeff.
Absolutely.
All right. So I guess I'll start it off by saying you live in Michigan. You've lived in Michigan your whole life. What's it like to have the Detroit Lions going to the National Conference Championship game next week?
It's kind of almost unbelievable. Like, I think the whole city and state, it's kind of unknown roads. Like we don't even know how to respond to it. It almost seems surreal that we're at this point. And the way the city is responding, the way that's just the outlying areas responding, like it's all anybody can talk about. It's like nothing else really matters. And it just brings everybody together. And I'm such a huge proponent of Detroit sports and the state of Michigan, like anything to bring it together for this city. It's phenomenal. And I think that you're seeing that even during the games.
Well, and piggybacking on Michigan's success in college football. Wow.
Yeah, this could be a really special year. I know our Pistons, we had to sacrifice the Pistons for the Lions to do good. I'm okay with that. We'll see if the Red Wings can kind of follow suit. So, but it's been an unbelievable year.
Well, to kind of date myself, I did my residency in Michigan in the early 90s, and I was a resident at Kern Hospital when they won their last playoff game.
Oh my God, I couldn't even imagine even then. With Barry Sanders and everything else.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as promised, we're going to do a work-life balance episode, if you will. And Greg has a long fishing history. Let me make sure I get this right. You are a United States Coast Guard Master Captain for almost 20 years.
Correct. Yep. I ended up getting my Coast Guard license when I was 18. So the first year that you could get it, I was one of the youngest ones in the state at the time, because right when I turned my 18th birthday, I decided to pursue it. And, it was a decision after being on the Great Lakes and fishing throughout my entire life that my grandfather and I thought, why not? This is a good way to expand a business, create a business, and, kind of do what we love to do out on the water.
Unreal. So just kind of a story. I was on LinkedIn, and I came across your LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
And it said charter fishing boat captain and podiatric foot and ankle surgeon. And I thought, okay, I got to reach out to Greg. I got to know more of this story. So you are a charter captain for Sarah K. Fishing Charters. Can you give us some background on that? And then we'll get into the podiatry stuff.
Yeah. So, it's something ever since I've been a little kid, if anybody knows Michigan, the Great Lakes, and we have just an unbelievable fishery here. And one thing my grandfather always took me to do in the summertime was go up to northern Michigan, just outside Traverse City, and we would go salmon fishing on Lake Michigan. Well, I did that throughout my years, and we started the business when I was 18. And, since then, I had a kind of a gap year in between my undergrad and then I did my master's. But in that time, I would run charters full time on Lake Michigan. So it'd be the same thing as like going out in the deep sea or ocean fishing. We take private clients out. We take them out for half or full day trips, and we provide everything for them. It's literally an all-inclusive charter. So when they come out, we catch fish, we clean them, and you would make sure they go home a happy client. It was a great way to run a business, connections, trade shows, TV shows. We had a lot of fun doing it. And I continue to do it. It actually helped me pay for a lot of the stuff in medical school when I was at Des Moines.
That's unbelievable. So let's unpack that a little bit more for the fishing part. So I do a ton of fishing, right? I fish for walleye like in Green Bay and Lake Erie, and those are all big waters. And Lake Michigan, you don't appreciate how big the Great Lakes are until you get out there and you can't see any land.
Oh, absolutely. And I try to tell people that, and they said, it's, you got to really watch the weather. And there are many oceans. I've been stuck out in weather 10, 12 foot waves before on my boat. And you have to be very careful and respect the water of what it is. But the fishery that we have in the Great Lakes fishing started, eons ago. But in the late 60s, we actually planted Pacific salmon, Chinook and coho salmon, to help combat something called the alewife, which is a small bait fish. And they would die in so many tons on the beaches that you'd have to use front loaders to get the alewives off because no one would go to the beach. It would smell so bad. And so one guy in the DNR decided that would be a great idea to plant salmon. Well, it turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we have salmon in all of our Great Lakes. We have 5 different types of salmon now. We predominantly catch only 2 or 3 of them. Other parts of the Great Lakes, you can catch more. And it's created a huge boom. It's created coastal towns and manufacturers of tackle and boats and everything. It's been an unbelievable opportunity in the Great Lakes for us to do this.
That's fabulous. So let me ask you a question. When you take out clients onto the Great Lakes, how big is your boat? How many lines how many customers can you bring? How many lines are in the water? Things like that.
So I run a 33-foot Tierra. It's a big cabin cruising boat. They're actually made in Michigan. They're absolutely gorgeous boats. We typically run 12 to 15 lines at a time. It kind of depends on what we're fishing for. Our season starts at the beginning of May. We'll go until about September, October. Our main months are usually June, July, and August. The king salmon usually will come in kind of beginning to end of June. You can get some beforehand. They'll start staging to run out the rivers at the end of August. Customers that come out, we can take up to 6 individuals. Most of the time, most people come with 4, but they're all private charters. And at that point, we go out there. And a lot of times, depends on the month, depends on what they want to catch. We have small families with kids, and they say they want to go for smaller fish. We'll concentrate our lines on smaller fish, or if somebody wants to come out for a trophy salmon, we tell them to come later in the year. Or if they want lake trout, we do a lot of varieties, and we try to go based on what the customer wants at that time of the year.
So when you're out there, you're trolling, right? Which means you're dry. You're running the boat. It's slow. I don't know. How many miles an hour are you going typically?
Usually we're doing it depends on the species too. That's the fun of it. Where walleye, you go a little bit slower. For salmon, we're usually doing about 2 to 2.5 miles an hour. Okay. For fishing for steelhead, we're usually doing about 2.8 to about 3.5 miles per hour. Lake trout's a little bit slower. It also depends on current. It depends on baits. It depends on everything that you have. And you have to concentrate on, when we say, people always joke around when we're going to go fishing. It's like, okay, well, what are we going fishing for? When we go fishing, we have to have a plan and attack. We have to know what baits, where we're going, the time of year, and it kind of really everything puts together a game plan. And that's the fun of it. And when the game plan works for our clients, and we move, we really try to make sure that we're on top of fish at all times.
So, can you comment on the use of electronics in fishing?
It's the electronics themselves have been unbelievable, not only for boat safety with radar and everything, but the way the electronics, I remember back in the day, and, I'm aging myself now because I'm almost 37, and we used to have paper graphs. Now these days they have these high complexity live sonar and everything that you can do where you can actually see real-time fish and your baits next to the fish. And it's really made fishing a lot of fun. Then there's underwater cameras too that you can use, and it does help out quite a bit. And it's from the last 20 years, we've come a long way. Yeah,
it's unbelievable. When I do walleye fishing, whether it's in the Wisconsin area or South Dakota, it's almost like hunting, like sight hunting. Yeah. Because you can see the fish on your live scope, and then you can literally cast to them with the appropriate baits. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I've been getting in more and more walleye fishing, and for that fishery and a lot of our salmon fisheries, like it changes the way that you fish tournaments. And you see all the big tournament guys now are fishing with live scope. They're not finding just pods of fish; they're finding the fish they want to fish for, and then they attack that particular fish. The Great Lakes, it's a little bit different just because we're in such vast water, we're moving at all times, but it still makes a big difference. And you can see how the fish will react in a live scope versus one bait versus the next. And it does really make a difference in the end.
Absolutely. So let's say you and I are going to go out for some coho salmon. I always get questions from people about, how do you put so many lines out in the water without getting them all tangled? And, with planer boards, outriggers and whatnot. Could you kind of do a layperson's description of how you do that when you're fishing with 11 or 12 lines in the water?
Absolutely. So we run pretty much 3 different types of spreads when we're fishing for salmon. The first thing is downriggers. Downriggers is a machine where you have a 12-pound ball at the end of this machine, and that machine will take your bait attached to this lead weight and move it all up and down the column. So we run 3 lines based on that, and that's probably the most old school, original way of fishing that we did back in the day. We also have things called dipsy divers, which are these little leaded weights that kind of go out to the side of the boat. And then we also run planer boards with lead core and copper. The big thing is knowing how far of line you have out, how deep that line is going, and to be able to spread the lines out in a certain fashion. So you have 3 downriggers. We'll have 2 dipsy divers on each side. So that's 7 rods. Plus, then we'll run 2 to 5 planer boards per side. And it depends on how rough it is. It depends on how far down the fish are. But as long as you're staying at a true kind of linear fashion and trajectory, and you keep things separated, you'd be surprised on how much you can get out there. Now, as the fish go down and get deeper and deeper, you have to start kind of cutting back on the number of lines you have, not only because they can get tangled, but the fact is that you might actually spook the fish at the same time.
That's a good point. So can you explain to our listeners what planer boards are? Because when I used to fish in Florida, we'd have outriggers, right? And we'd be getting left and right and getting them out there. But now we use planer boards for walleye, and I know you use planer boards. Can you explain that? Because it's just a phenomenal concept and invention, in my opinion.
It is. And I've been sponsored by one company called Church Tackle. And what it is it's a small planer board is just literally a piece of plastic with a weight on it. And they're weighted for one side versus the next. And depending on which side that it goes on, you can actually take your board and your line and spread it away from the boat. And as you spread it away from the boat, you can run multiple lines per side because you can control the length and the distance from where it's at.
Right. So if you're driving on Lake Michigan and you're going 2 miles an hour, you have a big swatch, both for medical terms, non-medical, there's medially and laterally, right? Left and right.
Starboard and port.
There
Same
you go.
Thing.
Starboard and port. And then, so you're going starboard and port out, and then you're going down at different levels. So that's a big swatch of water you're covering.
It is. And you have to be very careful. With walleye fishing, it's one thing because you're only fishing maybe 20 feet of water. But when it comes to salmon fishing, we fish in 600, 700, 800 feet of water, and we'll fish 200 feet down. And you have to make sure that you're stacking your lines appropriately. So we run our longest lines in the inside, and then we get shallower as we go out. So if a big salmon hits, it can go over our deeper lines. There's science behind it. And you have to be careful. And that's why when I do seminars, TV shows, and we talk to customers, you have to tell them, start small and work your way up. Don't try to go out there and just be, a hero and run all these lines at once. We've been doing this by countless trial and error and money that we've wasted online, that we've learned how the processes kind of go down.
Is it win or learn, right?
Yes, exactly. It hurts the checkbook, but that's why they say, bust out another 1,000. It's the same thing with salmon fishing.
Oh, that's so funny. So what are the baits of choice that you're using? Do they change for the different species of fish?
Absolutely, they do. Spoons are probably the most versatile bait. They're speed tolerant. There's different sizes depending on the actual size of the bait, depending on if it's salmon or if it's trout or anything like that. And as you go up and down the lake, the color will change because Lake Michigan does have different clarity of water. As you go south, it gets cleaner and deeper as you go north. So the colors and the timing of the year will also make a big difference. But then we also use a lot of things called rotators. And rotators are these plastic pieces with fins on them that where you put a little tinsel fly or some type of, we call a meat rig, which we use cut herring, and it'll actually flip around and act like a wounded fish and a bunch of other fish in general. And so we use that. And then later on for like lake trout, we'll use dodgers and these little glows, and dodgers just this piece of metal and it flops through the water. So many different presentations depending on what fish is. Steelhead, late season kings, it all makes a big difference. Coho is different thing from the spring. So the flashers and all of that attract the fish. Are you using sound? Is sound a part of it too, rattling or anything? Some of the baits that we use, cohos especially, they love the rattle. Some of the baits you can use for walleye can go over into the realm of using it for cohos as well. Kings, yes. Kings are more big into flash. They want to see those big flashy baits in the water. They want to see something behind it. That flash is what brings them in. And you can see them. They'll follow a bait for a mile or two before they actually hit it, which is much different than a walleye or a lake trout.
Right. Oh my gosh, I did not know that. So let's talk about lake trout a little bit.
Yes.
What are the nuances of lake trout other than, how is it different than salmon fishing?
So lake trout, you're going to be fishing a lot more in structure. You're going to be fishing in areas where you're not just nomadic fish. Salmon will go over structure, but lake trout are going to be tight to the bottom most of the time. So unless it's early in the season when the water is cold, you want to be on the bottom. And we will actually put our downriggers, our baits, and we will dig the bottom of Lake Michigan in certain portions. And that will kick up some sediment, it'll kick up some dirt. And as it does that, the lake trout come in and you can see the bait right behind it. And I can tell you sometimes lake trout fishing can be it's exhausting because we might have 4, 5, 6 lake trout on. As fast as you can get the rods to the bottom, they're there.
Oh my gosh.
It's fantastic. It's usually go a little slower on the boat. You usually do in the beginning of the year, a little bit more towards the end of the year as the water warms up. But it's a great fishery. They don't fight as hard as the kings, but they're delicious.
Wow. And so when you're doing most of this fishing, how far are you offshore?
Frankfurt is actually is where my boat is located. And Frankfurt is usually only about a mile to about 2 miles offshore. And we'll go north and south quite a bit. As you go further down south in the lake, it does get deeper further out. It stays a lot shallower because it's a little bit more of an even bottom. And as it does that, then you might have to go out 5, 6, 7, 10 miles, just depending on what you're looking for. So that's one nice thing. Frankfurt, we save a lot of money in gas. So
no, that makes sense. And with a 33-foot boat, how concerned are you with waves? Do you have to get off the water if it starts whipping up a little bit, or can you stay out there?
Yeah. It depends on what it is. With clients and stuff, we are usually pretty cautious. First thing in the morning, if I know it's blowing, and we watch the weather pretty consistently, we have multiple different apps. And if I say the weather's already at 6 foot at the buoy and we're saying, okay, it's going to just get rougher, we usually reschedule the trip. If I'm out there and I know that it's 2-3 foot and Bill's the 6 to 8 footers, we'll keep fishing. But anything over that, usually I'll come in.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, it can be dangerous at times.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But sometimes the fishing's better when it's a little windier, right?
Absolutely. Kings love it rough, and they love it rainy and windy. They overcast, they love it.
Kind of like walleye, right?
Yeah. Lake trout they're not as smart, so they like it sunny and fly calm.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's okay. You need some fish in every weather, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes for a good day fishing either way.
There you go. And people just want to catch a fish usually when they're out there, right?
It depends on the client. It's every port, it seems to have a little bit different clientele. And for me, if you have a family that wants to go out there and they say, hey, I just want to go catch some fish. Then you have the hardcore angler that wants to go out there and, you get 6 guys on the boat and they say, well, how fast are we going to get our limit? Because we want to catch 30 salmon. Unfortunately, salmon fishing is not that good at some days, and you might only catch 10 or 12. So it really just depends. But yeah, most people just want to go out and have a good time. They want to be in a safe boat and a clean boat and with good equipment and just be able to go out there and have a good time with their friends and family. That's what matters more to me than anything. I say half of it's fishing and half of it's the experience.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, how big are these fish you're catching between the lake trout and the salmon?
Yeah. So salmon, they live 4 years, they run up the river and they die. They'll spawn out. Lake trout can live indefinitely. They can live 60, 70, 80 years.
Wow.
Kings normally run anywhere between about 8 to about 20, 25 pounds. Once in a while, you will get some bigger over that. 3 years ago, they did catch the new state record salmon, which no one ever thought it would be broken, but I think it was 47.9 pounds.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was like 2.5 pounds bigger than the previous state record, which is absolutely, that'd be a big fish for even Alaska, when these fish came from.
Right.
But you never know what you can get. I guess that's the fun, just like walleye fishing. You just never know what you're going to catch. Absolutely. Lake trout can range usually around that 3 to 8 pound mark. But once in a while you get them 10 to 20 pounds, or if not bigger. The state record for Michigan was that caught on Lake Superior. And it was 62 pounds.
No kidding.
For lake trout.
Wow. So just another elementary question. You had mentioned lead core line. What's the difference between the typical fishing line people use and using lead core line? What does that mean to somebody who hasn't done a lot of fishing before?
So if we're tying with nylon in the OR or anything like that, that's standard fishing line. That's standard monofilament. When it comes to lead core is a weighted line. So it has a kind of a neoprene outer coating, and the center of it is actual lead weight. And every color of lead, it's 10 yards, goes down about 5 feet. So if you're running 10 colors of lead, it goes down roughly 50 feet. And so we can use that to judge and space our baits out and concentrate on a certain amount of fish, say to ourselves, okay, we know exactly where that's at and where we want to target these fish.
That's so awesome. Just a little story. When my kids were younger, we lived in Colorado, and we used to fish for kokanee salmon on Green Mountain Reservoir. So I'd have my boat out there. I'd have 3 colors, right? We'd have colors, and we just have a little spoon and a couple miles an hour. And man, we caught so many kokanee. It was unbelievable. But everybody that fished with normal line weren't catching anything.
Yeah. It's lead cores they call a stealth presentation. And that's what a lot of people use because it gets away from the boat. Same thing with the planer boards. Medial, lateral, starboard port. You can get multiple lines off each side of the boat and keep them at a stealth presentation. And that's what brings more fish. Dave, it's the difference between a guy not running lead core catching 3 fish and the next guy catching 13 fish. It's
so true. Isn't that? You wouldn't think it'd be that different, but it is.
Yeah. Some days that's all they want to bite.
Go figure. So 2 questions. One is, what is your favorite app for fishing? Is it wind stuff or is it fishing stuff? How does that work for you?
I would say my favorite app for fishing is for wind. Right. Is definitely for wind. Wind Finder is my favorite, and because people go on AccuWeather, weather.com with customers or clients, they say, oh, it's only supposed to be 5 miles an hour, and I say, okay, well, you need to look at the actual nautical forecast. And so then they go on like NOAA.com, or they'll go on Wind Finder, and it's blowing 35 out of the southwest. And I'm like, guys, there's a big difference between inshore and onshore wind. Absolutely. And I would say that's my favorite. And then, Facebook, as much as I don't like to be on it, it does give some darn good reports, though.
Oh, that makes sense. Now, for when you're guiding, when they have what they call small craft advisories, when the wind kicks up and the waves,
yes,
you have to abide by those, correct?
Absolutely. If there's a small craft advisory, we don't go out on the lake with clients. If there's already a small craft advisory, that means usually it's 5 foot or bigger, and it's going to build to a substantial wave height with the knot of winds. And at that point, it's just not worth it. You have to be cautious. You have to be smart about it, because people can get hurt even on the boat. It's a big boat.
Absolutely.
But if you tripped and you fell and hit a rod holder, I'm liable for that.
I've done some tournaments like out of Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and we were all praying for this small craft advisory to come out because it was so windy and raining and waves, and we were actually relieved when it came out.
Oh, I cannot tell you how many times during my charter years that I would pray for a blow day or some type of just hard weather so I could just go back to bed. There was just some days running 100, 120, 130 trips a year, and the end of August, middle of July, and I'm just exhausted. I just need 1 day of sleep. So I can totally appreciate that.
So for each species, I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but if you could pick one bait for each species, what would it be?
Oh, if I had to pick one for a lake trout, it would be a tin can dodger, which is just this metal piece with something called a spinning globe. It looks like a little bumblebee that sticks behind it. For salmon, I would definitely use a meat rig. Meat rigs are great. We are big fans of red meat rigs. Color sometimes makes a huge difference. And meat rigs we use with rotators and a little piece of herring. And, my guys at my dock know that I run a lot of meat. And it's become very productive in our boat.
Wow. That's awesome. So how far, you're living in the Detroit area, right?
Yep. I live in Livonia, Michigan.
Yep. And you practice in Troy.
Correct.
So just a sidebar, my wife and I used to live in the Somerset apartments there right off 69.
Yep.
And so how far are you away from your boat during the fishing season then?
So typically it's about a 3.5 hour drive.
Okay.
3.5 to 4 hours. And, we'll go up there on the weekends, and, during pod school, when we had time off between first and second year, I'd go up there and spend a month. And like even this last year, I would, between the end of residency and the beginning of starting with this practice in the middle of August, I spent the whole month of July and part of August just running charters, because I unfortunately we have bills. I have 2 children, and I have a mortgage. And so it's not too far away, but it was far away enough to where it was kind of vacation.
That makes sense. So as you go forward, I realize this has got to play out still, right? You're young in practice.
Yeah.
How do you anticipate getting some good fishing in, bringing some clients out, and balancing that with a practice and patients and a family? How's that going to work for you?
It's going to be an interesting dynamic. For me, and I can already see my clientele base is shifting. I keep a good amount of repeat clients, but I have more reps. I have more docs. I have more friends that are podiatrists that I take out. And that's kind of morphing into what it is now, so they understand my schedule. But what it'll be is I usually probably run 1 or 2 trips a weekend, and I'll probably be up there every other weekend if I'm not on call. And then I'm going to take a couple of weeks off. So I'll have a couple of week off here, a week off there, and then be able to run trips, on a daily basis at that point. So
do you have a partner so that when you're not up there, someone else is running the boat, or not really?
I don't. I have some good friends of mine that also have their own careers, and they help first mate, because usually it's myself and they'll help first mate, because it's tough to do by yourself. I had to do it multiple times. When you have 3 or 4 king salmon on at once and 4 or 5 clients, you're exhausted by the end by doing it by yourself. But I have some friends that'll come up. One of my good friends is a chemical engineer, and he comes up and he has a charter boat on Lake Erie, and he does it also on Lake Michigan. So we flip flop to help each other at the same time.
There's nothing better than getting 3 or 4 fish on at once.
Oh, it's the best. My record is 8 kings on at once.
No way.
Yeah,
wow.
Right in the harbor. It was utter chaos.
Just to share a personal fishing experience, we went down to Guatemala to go sail fishing one time with the family, and we were on a big boat, and we had 4 sailfish on at the same time.
Oh,
And that was, my wife caught a sailfish. She hadn't been fishing before, and she hasn't been fishing since. She's like, I'm done. I caught a sailfish.
And some people are like that. I've never caught a sailfish. It's one on my bucket list. But some people come out, they catch one big king, 20 pounds. Okay, I'm all done.
Yeah. So are people, are you getting replicas? Are you getting the fiberglass replicas for people? Do people want that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Some clients will. I had actually one of my good friends of mine who's a podiatrist a couple of years ahead of me. I've taken him out every year since I was a student, and he caught a king last year. I think it was 30 or 31 pounds, and he took it home last year to have him out.
Wow. Because, I know in Florida, when you catch a fish, they measure it out, and then, they'll make a replica. I don't know what they use even. They don't really use the fish itself anymore, do they? Or do they sometimes?
They do. Sometimes they do. Yes. Huh? Sometimes it just depends on up here. It depends on where you go and who you go with. A lot of times people want that skin replica or the skin mount itself, not the replica mount.
So can you help people out? You know who the best people are and all that?
Oh yeah. I have some good guys I know that are also charter boat captains that do it. There's some other really good ones in the northern Michigan area that are very good taxidermists.
Oh, that's great. When I was driving over here today for this podcast, I was thinking, we ought to do a CME event in Michigan and attach it to some fishing.
Absolutely. Traverse City is a great place to go. They got the walleye fishing, the salmon. Oh my God. It's unbelievable out there.
All right. Well, maybe we start working on that a little bit.
Yeah. I'd love that.
All right. So if other podiatrists listening to this podcast want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch?
So my website is Sarah K Fishing Charters, SARAK fishingcharters.com. That's the best way. Heck, they could call our office if they wanted to at Troy Foot and Ankle, and I'd be glad to talk to them. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Sarah K Fishing Charters on Instagram and Facebook, and that's probably the best ways to get a hold of me. And then, if people always have questions or anything like that, I like answering. It's just like I love doing, foot and ankle stuff and talking to my patients. And I feel like, the more you understand, the more you hone in your craft, the more fun it is.
Absolutely. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you the source of Sarah K Fishing, the name.
It was my grandmother.
Oh.
So all the old timers up at our marina, and I've been in my marina for 36 years of my life. Back in the day, the stigma there was you named your boat after your wife or your daughter. Right. So and I just continued the name, and it kind of just stuck the way it is.
That's funny because our boat, my oldest son is Steve, my second son is Dan, and my daughter's Jennifer. So my boat was named Stanifer.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. I feel like I actually knew a boat that was named Stanifer too.
Oh my gosh. And then my poor son, when my fourth was born, we didn't have any room left, and we got rid of the boat. And I think it scarred him forever, right? So let's shift gears then a little bit, Greg. Let's talk about podiatry for a few minutes.
Absolutely.
So you're growing up, you're fishing all the time. Did you have an affinity for the sciences? What happened when you were in college?
No, and that's a great question because my father's an internist. He does internal medicine and geriatrics, and I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. I mean, I grew up around him. I would shadow him in the hospital. I would do all this stuff, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And after undergrad, fishing, getting my master's, I knew I wanted to go to medical school, but I didn't know what. And so I actually I play indoor soccer, and I play on a weekly basis, and I actually broke my foot back in the day. Well, my father referred me to a podiatrist that was in his same building. And after that, kind of started thinking about it. I shadowed him a few times, and that's what got me into it. And fast forward, that individual is actually my program director in residency.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a real small world.
It's always a small world in podiatry, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So you went off to the Des Moines University College of Podiatric Medicine and Surgery.
Yep.
And then you were fortunate. You got to go back home for your 3 years of residency training.
Yep.
And so what was that experience like? I mean, how'd you enjoy Des Moines?
I love Des Moines. I thought Des Moines was a great city. When I got out there, I felt like it reminded me a lot of Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was very homey. Everybody was really friendly. The school treated everyone well. I felt we got a really good education. It was close enough to where I could still drive home on a somewhat regular basis. And I have a family in Chicago too, so that was close. And it was a great experience overall. I mean, the friends I made there, the relationships I made there. I mean, they're some of my best friends that I talk to every single day about cases and everything now. So I think that's a huge part of pod school. And you don't really appreciate that until you're done.
Isn't that the truth? You're absolutely right. So tell tell me about residency pursuit. You were doing clerkships and you're going around the country, and I'm assuming you were trying to get back to Michigan, yes or no?
Yeah, actually. So I was fortunate enough to where I was able to get all my clerkships back in Michigan.
Oh, really?
And I think we have more residencies in Southeast Detroit than I think any like square area in the country. And there were some good programs too. I wasn't going to shortcut myself at all by going to programs I didn't think that fit the mold for what I was looking for. But I was able to find some really good programs, and I went home. I lived with my grandfather, my wife and I, and he was a big influence in my life before her and I bought a house, and we were able to do all my residencies, rotations from that point. And ended up getting my number one choice in St. Mary's, and I couldn't have been happier.
3 years goes by awfully fast, doesn't it?
Those 3 years of residency went by so fast. It was like 2 years of pod school.
Isn't that funny how that works? So we're covering a lot of ground here. So your first job you got in Troy, which is near Livonia, of course.
Correct.
And you're an associate with a practice in Troy. Yep. How's that working out for you? What's your schedule like? I mean, I'm giving students and people that watch this podcast a little vision of the future.
No, and I think that's great, because I think that's actually the most important thing out of anything. Because like I was talking earlier, my good friends that I stay in contact, there's about 6 or 7 of them total that we talk on a daily basis. It's funny to see how each one of us has joined a little bit different of a practice or an association, where I joined a true kind of private practice. There's myself, 2 other doctors. We have 8 treatment rooms. I work Monday, half day, all day Tuesday, all day Thursday, half day Wednesday. And on Fridays in the mornings, I'm at the wound care center at the second biggest hospital in the state at Beaumont Royal Oak. We do our inpatient work there. We take inpatient call. We do a lot of our cases there. We have a private surgery center on our first floor of our building here at Unisource. So we do a lot of cases. I had a case in the afternoon. I went and did one over lunch, and I was able to come back upstairs and see additional patients. Where some of my other buddies they're part of a private practice. Some of them joined a hospitalist group. The hospital made their own podiatry group for them. And 2 of my other buddies joined ortho practices. And they're all from either Des Moines or Indiana or Wisconsin or Kansas City. They're all over the place. But it's fun to see how everybody's just a slightly bit different.
It's really interesting because there's so many, over the last 10 to 12 years, there's so many different opportunities, because private practice used to be the ticket, right? And then they'd have multi-specialty groups and some ortho groups. And now docs are employed by hospitals coming right out of residency training or fellowship training.
2 of my good friends, they literally opened up. One was in Evansville, Indiana. The other one's outside of Milwaukee. And they opened up podiatry practices in their hospital just for them. And they said, here's your practice. Run with it. We'll get you everything you need. So there's a big, push for having these podiatrists underneath the hospital group. And they're accommodating. It's fantastic to see it.
Absolutely. And there's just tremendous amounts of opportunity out there, and you don't hear about it all the time, right?
No.
But this is case in point. I mean, you and your clique of buddies all reaching out, all successful, doing different things. That's great.
Yeah. And I think at the beginning of pod school, there was always that persona that, it'd be hard to find a job. It'd be difficult to do what you wanted to do. And I don't think that's the case. And I read all that. And, of course, when you're a student, you get worried about it. But when you get out and you put your mind to it and you really go to a residency that fits you well, you try hard, you spend 3 years of really honing in your skills and perfecting your craft, the job will find itself to you.
That's a nice little snippet there. I'll have to put that on social media.
Fantastic.
Greg, that's awesome. So, okay, let me talk more about the profession. Greg, let's say a student from your undergrad calls you and says, I'm contemplating a career in podiatric medicine. What do you tell that student?
I tell them, I said, it's a great option because, when we first started podiatry school, everyone say it's a great work-life balance. And it really is. I mean, again, this kind of goes back to deciding what you want to do with your practice. My practice, even though I've only been since August, I find my practice moving more into something that I made myself. So where I say, okay, if you wanted to be a podiatrist, you say you don't necessarily have to be one specific podiatrist. You can be a wound care specialist. There's so many subspecialties of podiatry itself that you don't have to. And then that's the beauty of our job, is that there's so much to be had. And I think that's why it should be kind of enticing for undergrad students to get into.
Yeah, I've got a kind of a side story to that. I interview a lot of students that want to go into podiatric medicine, and not that they're all going to come to Arizona. They go to all the different schools. But a common theme is when they shadow docs and they're podiatrists, they're happy in their job. And I think that is because they've tailored their practice to what they like to do, to your point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you do surgery and stuff like that, and you go into a surgery and something that you enjoy doing, like as crazy as it sounds, I love doing big chakra recons. I love doing ankles and I love doing big chakra recons. That's what my residency kind of trained me as. And, when you have a scrub tech or you have a nurse that's in the OR with you and says, the podiatrists are always the happiest doctors in the OR. Like every time I talk to you or I talk to any other podiatrist, you guys are always smiling. You're always enjoying your work. And it's true. You go in, you have fun.
Yep, absolutely. Another tangent here. Any shout out to mentors? Who'd you look up to in your career as you've been going through this process?
Oh, Kevin Smith, I think, the dean of the podiatric school now at Des Moines, he was a huge influence for me, and he just talked down to earth. Dr. Yoho was huge. There were so many different ones there. And I have to say each one of them, I kind of learned a little bit more. The next Dr. Greenhagen, out in Nebraska. I mean, it was great.
Well, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. Well, Greg, I know you're on your lunch, and thanks for accommodating the Dean's Chat hours. I'm very grateful that you joined the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I had a great time, Jeff.
And also, I just wanted to share with you on the trips out to your boat and the drive, I'm sending you a Dean's Chat cup.
I love it. It looks great.
All right. And no shortage of caffeine, I imagine. So for all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you are watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. And most important, let's get out and go fishing with Greg in Lake Michigan and catch some coho salmon and some lake trout and kings. How's that sound?
Give me a call. Come enjoy the outdoors.
All right. And let's talk about a CME program. I think we could put something fun together.
Oh, I think we could do. There's a lot of opportunities up here, and everybody likes to go fishing. Yeah,
fishing's a common theme, right? All right, Thank you again. Cheers, everybody. Till next week. Bye-bye now.